Hey everybody, Pastor JB. I'm the worship arts pastor here at Radiant Life. This is season 4 of Radiant Reflections, and I am joined by an amazing guest,
Brandon.
Pastor Brandon Kinsey.
Spiritual formation pastor, Radiant Life Church.
So like I said last episode, we're like bringing in the big guns. This is the guy that is the pastor of spiritual formation.
Boy.
So, and I did when I was saving and processing the audio, I determined last episode was episode 20. So this is episode 21 of Radiant Reflections. Listeners, viewers, you know, we are chugging through with just lightning speed, practicing the way, be with Jesus, become like him, do as he did. We don't have any coffee on this episode because we drank some amazing coffee from Black and White called the Future Strawberry Daiquiri.
It was amazing.
It really was good, but if I had too much more, I might be talking too fast.
Yeah, I would probably see sounds.
Yeah. I've got a good amount of caffeine in the system. I've got about, let's see, I can tell you exactly, 37.5 grams on board right now.
Okay. All right. I don't have it broke down like that.
Well, you said you do like 50 grams in the morning, right?
Well,
Big.
no, I mean, I split, 25 technically.
So if you did 25 in the morning and we just did 12 and a half, you have 37 on board as well.
Boom. Okay. And I feel pretty giddy up right now.
Yeah, let's go. Have some lunch after this and then another cup of coffee, and we'll be sustained into the afternoon.
Yeah, I could probably go all night at that point.
Yeah. Do you have a cutoff on coffee? I do.
Yeah, 2:00, I try to make the max.
Yeah. Is that in your rule of life?
I don't have that in my rule of life. Jeez.
So here's what's interesting.
Okay.
We'll talk about this more in the episode.
Yeah.
But I'm super
convicted by that question.
I love the way that practicing the way has the rule of life builder. I like it.
Yes.
But I find for me, it's a little bit too 50,000 feet.
Okay.
And so what I've done is I've broken my rule of life into a triad of 3 pillars.
Okay.
Disciplines in my physical health, disciplines in my spiritual health, and disciplines in my emotional health.
Yeah.
So those 3 pillars I have as like headings of an outline.
Sure.
And then underneath them, I've got bullet points that say, okay, this is like under my physical one. I want to take my vitamins every day. Sounds like a simple thing, but for me, I know I'm going to feel better when I take them.
Yeah.
And so that's part of my rule of life.
I love
my vitamins.
I love it.
And my emotional side, I want to have a meaningful conversation with my wife once a day, at least once a day, for that emotional, relational connection.
Yeah.
So we hope you're building a rule of life. That's the entire goal of season 4 of Radiant Reflections, is for you to come out the other end, having hopefully gone page by page with us on this book, but then creating something like Brandon has shared here. I've got it on my phone in a note.
Yeah, use something, whether it's the old-fashioned pencil and paper or a digital form, a spreadsheet, or a triad. Like, just do something.
And as Brandon mentioned last episode, do it in community as well.
Oh, my goodness.
So like Brandon and I have been riffing off each other in these couple episodes, and we're learning from each other like, oh, man, that resonates with me. That's something that I want to add, or maybe something I want to subtract from maybe I'm getting a little bit too in the weeds.
Right.
But we can do it together.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and doing it with community, that's huge.
Is huge. Cool. All right. So we left off. We're on page 162.
Okay.
And we left off talking about the trellis and the vine. That the rule of life is just like a trellis is in a vineyard. You can't grow grapes without a trellis system of some kind. I described the trellis that our family used in our orchard and our vineyard. The rule of life, I think it's probably would behoove us to go back to page 161 and read this one paragraph, because it's like the summation of the book. And Brandon, you read it in episode 20. A rule of life is a schedule, a set of practices and relational rhythms that create space for us to be with Jesus, become like him, and do as he did, as we live in alignment with our deepest desires. It's a way of intentionally organizing our lives around what matters most, God. I love that definition.
I love it too.
So
I marked it and starred it.
Same. So with that in mind, let's dive into the heading on page 162. You already have a rule of life. Let's talk about that.
What do you mean? I haven't gotten started yet.
Yeah.
No,
this was week 1.
Literally the first
of Ryan's series in formation.
Yeah, you are already being formed.
Yeah. Read that.
Well, here's the thing. You already have a rule of life. It may be written or unwritten, conscious or subconscious, wise or foolish.
So let's double click on that. Talk about it a little bit. What do you think he means by that, Brandon?
So I like more of the phrase or the wording that things have already formed me. I guess that's just the way I am processing it. So there are already things established in my life. There's already a rule of life. Prior, that's why I love the word intentional, is because I want to be more intentional with my rule of life, because I have an awareness of things that have already formed me, and maybe a word to use is an old rule of life, things that have deformed me. So I'm a little abstract in that thought. I don't know if it makes or if it's clear to people, or if it has clarity or not, but that's how I'm processing it. Is like, there's already things that I've been doing. There's already habits that I've instilled. You know, we're kind of picking on digital and media consumption. Like, yeah, if the average is 4 hours a day, like maybe that was my rule of life.
TV.
Right. Or whatever media.
Social media is a larger number.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't.
Well, here's
doubt that.
Think about this, listeners, viewers. A rule of life is intended to naturally and automatically do the things that Jesus did. So let's talk about a rule of life in our lives. When you woke up this morning, listener, viewer, and you did the things you do, did you think about brushing your teeth? Nobody thinks about it. It's just in the morning, you brush your teeth. It's just what you do naturally, automatically, organically. You wake up in the morning. Some of us shave, right? You brush your teeth, you take a shower, you work. There's just some things that you naturally do. Right. So think right now, what are some things that you are naturally doing? That's your rule of life.
Right.
The automatics, the things that just like, I mean, when I drive here to the office, do you think about from Jacob Street, do you think about driving here? The car just kind of does it. It just goes, right? Yeah.
Just paying attention whether I have to stop at the red light or is it green.
But you're not thinking about, I need to turn on this street or whatever. No. You've run that path so many times.
How hard do I have to press the accelerator or the brake?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
it's automatic.
It's automatic.
So I think the point that John Mark's making is that, you know, you might think, well, rule of life, that sounds like really mystical and hyper spiritual, and I don't have that. You actually do.
Right.
You just don't. You may not be conscious of it.
Well, and he hits this by a couple of questions on page 163.
The
question
those are great.
Isn't, do you have a rule of life? It's, do you know what your rule of life is? That's what we're discussing, right? Are you aware of what your rule of life is? And is it giving you the life that you want? Love that question.
Keep going.
Is it working for you or against you?
For or against?
Yes. I love these questions, because if you actually sit and ponder them, it's like, oh, this thing that I'm doing, is it actually drawing me closer to Jesus or being like him or doing what he does? Like you'd have to wrestle with that.
And you would have data and metrics. Just stop for a moment and think, hey, I know that I want to lose 10 pounds in the next 6 months. How am I going to know whether that's happening or not? I'm going to step on a scale, right? Then I'm going to have to think about, okay, what did I put in my body? The last 7 days for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I ate McDonald's. And so the scale says a certain thing.
Right.
So I can naturally go back and say my rule of life is working against me.
Right.
Because if my goal is to be with Jesus, be like him, and do as he did, what are the inputs? Right. What are the things? And the next sentence, right after you read it, I have asterisked, highlighted, and underlined. The best way to tell is to take a kind of spiritual self-inventory, an honest assessment.
Being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I hit that a little bit in the last episode, but yeah, you have to slow down enough and like, where am I actually at on this whole thing?
Yeah. And I think it comes back to the community conversation too.
Yep.
For you and me, it's a lot of times it's going to our wives whose voices many times sound like the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
And to ask them, hey, how are you experiencing me right now?
Yeah.
And then we get between the eyes
Yeah.
shot.
When you get
Well,
that
you're
honesty.
kind of being a jerk. Okay. Tell me more about that. Tell me how. What am I? When you do this, when you say this, oh, now I've got some awareness and I
Yes.
can say, I love my wife. I don't want to treat her disrespectfully or dishonor her. I want to love her and cherish her. So I'm going to start talking differently.
Yeah.
I'm going to start acting differently. I can't come to those conclusions until somebody makes me aware.
Right. Which I would argue is why you need to have your rule of life with a community.
Come on.
So, last two sentences on 163.
I got those too.
If your emotional life is off kilter, if you feel far from God, stressed, anxious, and chronically mad, and you're not becoming more of a person of love, then the odds are that something about the system of your life is poorly designed.
Go up one sentence. Your system is perfectly designed to give you the results you're getting.
Exactly. So here's an abstract thought
Okay.
is to see when things are off kilter. I observe that when I'm doing community with other people.
Okay.
So when I notice, when I get together with my community on a weekly, we sometimes have to adjust the day of the week, but typically we meet on Mondays. We always have a meal together.
Oh, wow.
And you can sense when maybe one of the couples in our circle, there seems to be a little tension, or one person seems to be off kilter, to use John Mark's words of, whoa, that response to their spouse or their kids, that seemed off.
Had a little edge on it.
Yeah. But then just the way that I'm wired is like, do I talk like that to Amy? Do I talk like that to my girls? So I'm observing this behavior in someone else. But let's flip that more on a positive note. Whoa, their kids just come into the room just like bananas, and how gentle and patient and the tone that they spoke to their child. And it's like, whoa, that is not my default. Something is off kilter in me that I don't respond to my children when they're off with something. And so I love, because you travel a lot, you sit in the airport, like you people watch. You just observe people.
Yeah.
You do the same thing within your community. Now, if you are intentional about your community, everybody having their rule of life, this is the lens that we're viewing
Now
life.
we're talking.
What would that look like?
Yeah.
Whoa. So that's our group, my circle of people. Like, that's what we're moving towards, is we're trying to establish what our rule of life is. We're going to be open and transparent about what that is with one another. And now we've built up so much trust over this last year. We can, hey, what do you think about this in your area? Like, we can call one another out in love towards one another.
So the basic trellis looks the same or similar to everybody else.
Yeah.
But the way that vine interacts with it's going to be different.
Yes.
But you're able to say, and this is one of the things I love about Pete Scazzaro and Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. They have a rule of life as part of their hiring practice at the church. And one of their rules is, if you don't keep the Sabbath, you don't have a job. You can be fired from the church. Now, Pete's not the pastor there anymore. Reach
Right.
Velotis is. But this was something they developed over time. Keeping the Sabbath was such an important rule of life that it was a part of the employee handbook.
Yeah.
Oh, from Pete's mouth to God's ears is what I say.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I have read that, and so we're trying to do that with our little circle in this
beautiful.
journey, and I love, because it's like things, I feel far from God, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm chronically mad. I can observe, like, those are like the check engine lights on the dashboard,
Good.
and I believe, in my humble opinion, and what I've experienced in my own life, is God uses my circle of people to reveal the check engine lights in my life.
Diagnose.
Yeah. Like, oh, hey, something's off right now. We need to diagnose what's going on below the surface. Pete Segario loves using like an iceberg and everything that's below the surface. Hey, here's an indicator of something that's going on below the surface. I believe that God uses community for that, to expose things.
I mean, back to the dashboard idea, and I want to preface what I'm about to say with this statement. I've never changed oil in a car, so I only know things in proxy. But I know this, like there's a temp gauge on a car.
Yeah.
When that temp gauge goes high, it could mean this. It could mean, you know what? You're just low on coolant. That's all.
Yep.
It could also mean you've blown a head gasket.
Yep.
And now you need a full top end on your motor. You need a water pump. That's about a $1,500 job.
Yep.
It's major, major damage. And you might have warped the whole block of the motor from the overheating. You don't know. But when that light starts going, that's the thing I told my kids, being a non-mechanical person. I just told my kids when they got their license, if the temperature gauge goes high, pull over.
Yes.
It's time to stop.
Yes.
You can't keep driving.
Right.
You've got to pay attention to that because you could cause, it might be something simple.
I've blown an engine in a car.
You've done it.
Yes.
Okay.
So I drove a vehicle. It overheated. We shut it off.
So the temp gauge went tacked over to H.
Yeah.
to
Lights
hot.
or bells are whistling. And it's like, okay, we shut it off. Yeah. But instead of just like taking it to the shop, now granted, we were up in Battle Creek, so we're 45 minutes away. It's like, we'll just run it. And we didn't get all the way home.
That happened to your minivan down in Fort Wayne too.
That was a timing belt issue.
But it blew the motor.
It did blow the motor.
Yes,
yeah. But this time when we're coming back from Battle Creek, it just completely died.
Okay.
Had to wait on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Someone came and helped us. They towed it. By the time they got into the shop, they're like, nope, the engine's toast, and had to put a rebuilt engine in it.
And in our context, we have a guy at our church. He's part of a team that I serve on. His name's Andrew Fish. He's a mechanic in our community at Sproul's Auto. Great guy, loves Jesus, and really good at that. And so sometimes it takes a person in your life like that to diagnose, that knows things more than you know.
Yes.
And I always say that. Fish will ask me different questions like, you want to repair this? I'm like, do you think it needs repaired, Fish?
Right.
He's like, yep. Okay, then that's what we need to do, because you know 1,000 million more things than I do about this car.
Yeah.
And so I'm trusting you.
Yeah.
I'm putting my faith actually in God's gifting in your life to do the thing that he's made you to do.
Right.
Community, I just love what God's doing at your house and with those people. What a beautiful thing that is.
And that was not our intent when this group started.
Okay.
Our intent was just to do a life group, which here at Radiant Life is just a message base. We have a conversation about the message, but the chemistry just was really good. And the level of transparency and authenticity, it just accelerated quicker than a lot of groups that I've been a part. I've been a part of a bunch of different groups, but this one was really special. And then it kept going. And now as we've all been on this journey and spiritual practices and disciplines and now this language of rule of life, it's like, well, why shouldn't we just do this together? And so now I'm more aware of how I'm coming across towards other people, my attitude towards my circle, my people, my rule of life community, whatever language you want to use there. But I can also observe things. I mean, I've learned things in my marriage by the failure of other examples, not in my circle.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Stay away from that.
Come on, man.
I've learned from bad examples as well. So why not surround yourself in community, even if, and I'm not saying if any of my circle is watching this, I am not pointing the finger at you at all.
Are you sure?
Yes. They know me.
Yeah.
But there's been examples in my life like, whoa, that person really fell short here. They missed the mark. I do not want to miss the mark in this area of my life.
Yeah.
And like one of the examples that he gave was chronically mad. It's like if I see that in my life or if I see that in my circle,
It's a light on the dashboard.
it's like that's a light on the dashboard. So I think God uses that environment, this rule of life community, if that's a term.
And fast forward, one of the hard things you're going to face in the next 2, maybe 3 years or shorter is the Christian pogrom thinking, right? Let's stay connected to this community because we have this rule of life and we have to stay at Brandon's house and we can't, when God wants you to procreate.
Oh,
Healthy
sure.
things procreate.
Yeah.
Healthy things are when 2 to 3 of the people in your group, 2 years down the road, you still have this rule of life. Now they're with 6 other couples.
Yeah.
And now they're making new spiritual babies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're developing a new rule of life. And
Absolutely.
we see this beautiful expansion of the kingdom of God and rules of life communities just exploding. And I feel like that's the small fire that is started right now at Radiant Life Church. Pastor Ryan is putting a bunch of gas and sometimes dynamite on that fire in these teachings and formation. God is calling us. He is leading us as followers of Jesus to become communities of formation and to not just stay there, but to infect others.
Yeah.
And to say, this is such a beautiful way to live with Jesus by the power of the Spirit. Won't you join me?
Yeah.
And that's the real heart behind this podcast, this whole season. Like, we read this book, and as staff members, we've been on a journey of formation for 6-8 years.
Absolutely.
Started way back with Enneagram tests and
Yeah.
emotionally healthy discipleship. And so as we're experiencing the joy of being with Jesus, doing what he did, it's just like, man, we want to tell everybody about it. So we hope you're doing that. We hope you're developing those things. And maybe there's some check engine lights right now in your life. And you're like, man, Kinsey's he's picking my number right there. He's in my head. God's with you. He's with you, sitting right there with you with those lights on. He didn't go anywhere. Now you're aware. And awareness is power. There's power in becoming aware. Now you can take that before God and your community and say, man, I'm a chronically mad person, and I know that this isn't what Jesus wants for me.
Mm-hmm.
I need your help. I need to be accountable to you. Jesus, I need you to speak to me and empower me to be different than I am, because you intend me to be not chronically mad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to use that word picture of the check engine light, like he's the mechanic. He knows what's wrong with whatever
And the manufacturer.
Yeah. And the manufacturer of all the parts. And
All of it.
like he knows what's going on with, quote unquote, that system that's off, or that light is going on. And he wants to meet you there. He's not just saying, no, you go fix it. He wants to be with you in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And at least for me, my default is I just want to run or try to fix it on my own, or not allow him into the depths of, quote, that system. And I'm learning to let go of that and allowing him to go deeper and deeper into those systems.
And this is probably a good place, I know you're going to amen this, for us to pause and say that sometimes there are enough check engine lights in your life that it's time to trust a trained counselor or a therapist. It's time to, and I'm shameless plugs here, maybe connect with a spiritual director to help diagnose, like help be a voice of the Spirit to say, I see that light too. Have you considered this?
Yeah.
Sometimes it requires some help. I should say most of the time it does. It's not very often that God just like hits us with a lightning bolt and we're different.
Yeah.
There's process and time and failures and 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But when we ignore the lights, when we ignore the chronic anger, when we ignore those things, we are asking and inviting catastrophe. We're asking for failed marriages. We're asking to get fired from our jobs. We're asking to lose connection with the health in our bodies. We're asking for a complete emotional breakdown.
Yeah.
I
would say I shared in the last episode about some of the darkest points in Amy and I's marriage. I was not paying attention to the check engine lights.
Oh, wow.
And I think Amy would say she wasn't paying attention to her lights as well. And yeah.
You got to the bleeding edge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I just realized that as you're sharing that picture of, you know, I love word pictures. So it's like we're talking about a mechanic. You know, we're talking about Mr. Fish. Like, he's great at what he does, but he also knows what he can't do. He can't rebuild a transmission. So what I hear you saying to the Christian counselor or spiritual director is you might need a specialist. So if the transmission's out in your life, you might need to go to the transmission shop and have the transmission people help you with that transmission.
No.
Just a thought. I don't know if that will stick for anybody.
100%. So make a step, make a change, listener, viewer. Maybe it's time to connect with one of those specialists.
Yeah.
All right, move on to 164. We're just rip roaring here, like a page and a half. This is bad. I mean,
you highlighted everything.
Here's what my 164 looks like, listeners, viewers. The top sentence.
Yeah.
Your life is the byproduct of your lifestyle.
Sit in that.
And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What's broke?
Right. And sometimes, maybe, you don't realize that it's broke.
Read the next line.
The problem is not that your rule of life isn't working, but that it is.
It's working perfectly fine.
Right. And so maybe your quote unquote norm
or your rule of life
it's not helping you be like Jesus, doing what he does. But maybe you can't observe that because you're not observing that, where I would argue that a rule of life community is going to expose you to people who are being like Jesus and doing what he does, doing what he says. And so maybe you're completely unaware of your lifestyle is not exhibiting Jesus because that's just all you've been raised in. That's all that you know. I'm fired up about that.
No, definitely. Keep going there on 164. What else is sticking out to you?
Well, you marked more, but I'm on
that same. Read that whole section, though.
Okay, so the third paragraph here. A rule of life is an invitation to a very different definition of freedom than that of the modern world. An invitation to embrace the constraints that, if you give yourself to them, will eventually set you free.
Look at the sentence above that. Your freedom is what got you here, not your constraint.
Right. So was it this page? Like, he's talking about somewhere he shared about like being hungover, there was an example,
okay. Drinking too much.
Yeah, drinking too much, and you're hungover. You have no energy the next day, but your freedom allowed you. But that was the byproduct, the fruit of that. And it's like the things that are in my life. Yeah, I have freedom with it, but what's the byproduct on the other side of it? What's the fruit that's hanging on my tree or my vine because of the quote unquote freedom? Now, what I was struck by, even as in rereading this section, was that word constraint. I'm wondering if personality and temperament can play into this. So as a Enneagram 7 and a sanguine temperament, I don't like to be constrained. I'm resistant. Now, my life prior to being born again, I was all about freedom and do not want to be constrained. In fact, the laws that are in place aren't going to constrain me. I was very against culture and rule, very anarchy type of attitude sort of thing. But man, the fruit that was in my life was not
what did that freedom
good.
give you?
Time in jail, broken relationships. Oh man, the list goes on with that. So my freedom that I had, that fruit was not very good. And so what I realize now is that the word I like to use, or constraints, would be guardrails. Like, God gives us guardrails. Oh, yeah, that's the next. Yeah, it's the next section.
Yeah.
So the best word picture, because I love word pictures, is like in our backyard, there's a school. I actually went to school there from kindergarten through 4th grade. And there's a big playground. They actually have 2 playgrounds at that school. and they had some really cool things. They've taken it down. They put up a new playground. But basically, it's like, okay, recess is out. Kids go nuts. But what is around the playground? There's a fence around the playground. There's constraints. There's guardrails. So it's like, hey, go bananas within the playground.
For the 7 sanguine people.
Yes. Because my natural tendency would be, oh, let's go have fun in the parking lot or the street where injury or death can happen because of a car. It could be fun.
Right.
But then a car, someone's not paying attention, comes by and smokes me. And like, that's not good fruit. And so I love that word picture of a playground. They have fences around them, but there's also fun. There's joy that happens within those constraints, those guardrails, those boundaries.
Joy in the constraint.
So it took me a really long time. I think I'm still learning this, even at my point in my walk, of how important that is in my life. And so it's easier for me to be more intentional about embracing this rule of life because, hey, Jesus said, John 10:10, we kind of alluded to it, like he wants us to have an abundant life within that playground that has guardrails around it. I just need to learn to embrace that because I know that he has something better for me.
So there's freedom in constraint.
Yes.
Yeah. So
which seems backwards to my wiring default.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I right now, we could shut all the gear down. We could get in our cars and we could go over to sort of over there by Abbott Labs to the airport, and we can get into an airplane and we can go up 10, 15,000 feet, and we have the freedom to jump out without a parachute.
Sure.
But if we put the constraint of like, I'm going to have this gear and this thing that at a certain elevation, when I jump out of this plane, it pops out and it allows me to float safely to the ground, and I have this amazing adrenaline rush, and I actually live through the experience.
Right.
Versus just the 30 seconds of experiencing that exhilaration and then splat.
Yeah.
There is freedom in constraint.
Yes.
When God gave us his commands, I mean, a lot of times when we hear the words constraint or commandments, we think, I envision shackles. I envision handcuffs.
Yeah.
But what God really intended when he gave us commands and guardrails is loving instruction.
Yeah.
In fact, when he talks about guarding the Sabbath, that word guard means parapet. And the word parapet, it literally is, in old times, the buildings were flat and they had these flat roofs. And in the cool of the evening, people would go up on these flat roofs to enjoy the night sky and the cool air, not be in the stone structures that had been heating up from the heat of the day. Yeah. Well, imagine being on top of a flat roof that's 2 stories high. There's danger at every edge. And so there was even a command in the Torah that said you have to put a parapet, a fence around the top of this building so that you could enjoy all the blessings of what the top of the building would provide. It's the same command that God gives us to guard the Sabbath. There are these constraints, these parapets, these fences, these rules, these laws, loving instructions, call it whatever you want, that actually bring life. I mean, it's proven. When we were kids, do you remember getting in cars and like sitting in the front seat in between mom and dad? Like no seatbelt, no car seat, no nothing.
Climb over the seats and everything.
We did
else.
whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
Like this has been the early 80s, right?
Especially the station wagon that had the back seat facing the other way.
We had one of those too. And then I'd be people get into car accidents, a lot of death. And then we came out with this law that says when you get into a motor vehicle, you're going to have to put a seatbelt on.
Yeah.
And now life is actually sustained through a law.
Yeah.
That's what John Mark is talking about. What else on page 164?
I am so focused on that word constraint. Like that's just right where I'm at. I'm, that Romans 12:2, I'm that renewing of my mind. My default for so long has been that constraints are a bad thing. And so I'm in that process.
You're not alone.
Of renewing my mind of, no, there's actually true freedom with constraints. So
well, and the interesting thing is, apart from temperament, the one temperament commonality that we all have is a sin nature. And our sin nature, whatever it looks like, it always looks like, I don't want to be constrained. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it with no consequence.
Yeah. You're not telling me what to do.
Yeah. The bottom 3 paragraphs I feel like we've got to read on 164.
Hit it.
Picking up your phone first thing upon waking and checking social media isn't just a bad habit. It's a choice to let yourself become formed into a certain kind of person. Mm-hmm. Spending more time reading the news than reading scripture isn't just wrong. It's a choice to become more like your favorite news commentators than like Jesus. Now, listen to this. Spending your money on yet another thing you don't need isn't just playing around with disposable income. It's feeding an appetite within you that will grow only more ravenous.
Ouch.
I mean,
pierces right to the heart.
Solomon said in Proverbs that the fire is never satisfied. It's one of the things that the dry earth, when you pour water on it, the empty womb, these things never have an end.
Yeah.
And what we feed, that fire grows.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I talked about that in the last episode of I just really struggle with contentment, and I just want to consume. You know, I love tools. I love woodworking stuff. I also like disc golf, and just like, do I really need another disc?
Well, if it helps you get the hole in one, I mean.
Yeah. So that's the reason why I can justify it.
Well, moving on to 165, guarding and guiding. And Brandon and I have kind of been poking at this already. We're already talking about this. But look at that middle section there. I really love that. A gardener has 2 jobs.
Oh, I love this.
Tend the plants and keep out the weeds.
Oh, my goodness.
In the same way, each of us needs to ask, what do I want to put into my life? And what do I want to keep out? Plus, what do I want to grow?
Yeah.
And what do I want to die? And I'll add to this, and how much of the answers to those questions are being informed by the Holy Spirit versus my own spirit.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's where I'm at in my walk, is I'm having a greater awareness of what I want in my life. And a rule of being intentional about a rule of life has helped to expose that. Like, yeah, I desire this fruit to show up in my life because it was non-existent before.
And there's such ancient understanding. We mentioned last episode Ignatius of Loyola. Ignatius is one of the first people to help us recognize that actually you can trust your emotions sometimes. You can trust your desires sometimes. It just has to fit within the grid of a godly life. If I have a desire to be intimate with a woman who's not my wife, well, that doesn't fit in the grid of what's good. That's going to harm me. It's going to harm my wife. But if I have a desire to have physical affection for my wife, wow, that's a desire that's God-given. That's blessed. That's something that God wants for me. It's not unholy. It's good.
Totally agree.
What else on guarding and guiding? You got anything else there? I have a goal to get through page 168.
Okay.
We've got like 10 minutes here. Can we do it?
Oh, boy.
Okay.
So he gave the examples.
We've got to read all of them. I just feel like I got to read every one.
All right. So let's alternate on this.
Sounds good.
All right. So the first example for...
how can we guard and how can we guide our lives according to a rule of life towards holiness and righteousness?
And he's giving some examples of what has worked in
They might
his
resonate.
life. Because I've taken some aspects of this. I applied it to my life.
Me
so the first example he says is parenting my phone. I have an old school analog alarm clock by my bed. My phone goes to bed at 8:30 p.m. each night, tucked away in a drawer in my home office, and it isn't allowed up until I finished my morning time of prayer and hit my daily quota for writing.
If you will do this one thing, your life will change.
So I have an analog alarm clock by my bed as well.
Same.
And I don't bring my phone into the bedroom.
Why is that?
Oh, geez. Well, I because I'll be doomsday scrolling.
Can't you use your phone as an alarm clock and just say no?
Sure.
With that impulse to check social media? Can't you do that? Why can't you do that?
Well, I mean, one particular thing is I am married. I am blessed to have my wife. I don't know. What about just a conversation next to the person who I'm committed to for the rest of my life, who's laying next to me?
Yeah.
Instead
Rather than
of
that device.
scrolling through my phone.
I was being totally facetious, but I think part of what happens in a rule of life and community is vulnerability. And so I'm asking Brandon, like, why can't you do that? And I'm going to answer for him for myself. I don't know why I can't, but I know that I can't. I know that I can't have my phone in my room. I know this about myself. I'll be on this podcast and tell you I'm a pastor at this church and whatever. I've walked with Jesus 25 years. I am weak. And I am sinful. And I don't have the self-control and self-discipline to have a phone in my room and just use it as an alarm clock. So I must guard and guide my life. And that thing stays. It goes to bed.
I agree.
There's my confession.
Well, I would confess as well along with you that, I know that I do not have self-control with it.
Because it's a powerful thing. Guys, there's billions of dollars being spent with psychologists and psychiatrists to build an algorithm to hook you. If you think you're smarter than the people behind your phone, let's get a little bit more serious. If you think you're smarter and more powerful than the spiritual realm that's behind the powers and principalities motivating what's behind coming on your screen, you are deceived.
Yep.
There is a spirit and there is a king on a throne who is greater, but you're not him.
Yeah.
So you need to retreat to him and find your refuge in him, because you're no match for the enemy. You by yourself, he'll destroy you.
Amen.
Second point, practicing a full 24-hour digital Sabbath. We power off all devices, including our phones, computers, and TV, for the entirety of our weekly day of rest and worship. This goes for our teenage kids as well. Ugh. I'm not there.
I'm not. I'm glad you said that.
We confessed.
We're working towards that. That's a lofty goal. We've taken baby steps in this direction. That is my desire. I mean, part of it is, like, I do like woodworking. I would like to create a cool little wooden box that the electronic devices would go in to this, I don't know, Sabbath box.
You know, they have these boxes.
Well, I want to make one.
But this one has a code on it. You cannot open it for 24 hours.
Oh.
Once you put it in and shut it,
I don't like those constraints.
They're literally, you can buy these on Amazon. But listen to us.
That's convicting.
Listen to us talk about this. This speaks to the power and the draw of these things.
I'm convicted more than ever because of how hard this is, actually reveals to me how important this is.
Preach. Yeah. The grittiness that you feel against that constraint is like, oh, wow, there's actually something more to this than just being a phone. What else?
What's number 3?
Third example.
Limiting my social media use to 1 day a week.
Dang.
I think of it like breathing toxic fumes. Sometimes necessary to live in the modern world, but no good for you, and too much will kill you.
Goodness gracious.
I love that toxic fume word picture that he's using. I've made some significant steps in this area. I wouldn't say that I'm 1 day a week. I wasn't even on social media for a very long time. I was trying to sell some stuff on Marketplace. And so I kind of re-downloaded all these apps. And now I'm in this process of uninstalling all of these apps just because I'm very aware of how it sucks me in. So.
Well, listeners, viewers, you know, I've shared what my methodology with this exact thing is. I found that once I tracked and paid attention to how much time, I was appalled. I was disgusted. I was sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
And so I have put in hard constraints in. I have only so many minutes on my phone per day.
Okay.
It's a budget, and it's actually in the parenting settings.
Oh,
the parental control settings.
Yeah.
And there's a code linked to very specific devices. Once my device once I spend all my minutes in a day, it's done. And I have to actually physically go to Lisa and be like, "No, I need some more. Please give me more Instagram." I have to act like a crackhead.
I didn't get to finish reading that post.
And it's been such a beautiful constraint because it doesn't happen very often that I humble myself and go and ask for more time. And it's just like the money in my bank account. If I don't have money to spend, I don't have money to spend.
Right. Yeah.
When my minutes are done on my phone, it's done. Because I still do value the community side of social media.
Yes.
But man, when I break those constraints, and for me, I'll just tell you what mine is. It's in my rule of life. It's 30 minutes a day. Combined between all those apps, I don't spend more than 30 minutes. When I go past that, oh man, all of a sudden, I got to have that new coffee thing.
Yeah. Oh,
man, my relationship with my wife, it's just not good enough.
Oh my goodness.
My house, I got to remodel it. All of this covetousness just boils to the surface.
Yes. Yeah.
That's always the thing. Jealousy and covetousness are the result.
Oh my goodness. And I'm such a victim. No, not a victim.
Willing participant.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
I totally agree with you. But at the same time, like there is this benefit of social media well, let me give a very real life example from this week. So a very dear friend of mine, he was a pastor of mine, passed away this last week. And God used him in an incredible way in my discipleship. In fact, he was the one that baptized me. But I got to see two of his daughters post on social media and to see their words about how they spoke about their father. Like it was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to see. So it's like, it's this sharp sword that you have to wield it very carefully or you're going to cut yourself.
Yeah.
And so limiting the social media so you don't cut yourself, it is crucial.
Yeah.
And I think you have to remove the blinders of self-deception of how much does this actually have a grip on me? And maybe here's a suggestion, audience, is do a hard fast from social media just to break that wiring and the dopamine that's being released in your brain.
Oh, it's physical. It's chemical.
Yeah. And then if you have that rule or like, I'm okay with 30 minutes a day, whatever you decide with Holy Spirit, and then reintroduce yourself with that rule instead of just like going from massive consumption. I think that's the way I'd have to do it. That's the way I have done it. So,
yeah. Point 4, some more examples. Well, it's what we just said. Limiting my intake of media, TV, film, YouTube to a max of 4 hours a week. I lifted this from The Rule of Life from Andy Crouch and the community at Praxis. Instead of having our imagination saturated by media, we seek to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Yeah. We commit to establish structured limits for our use of screens and our consumption of entertainment in quantity, frequency, and moral character. That's the stuff.
I would have been okay if they wouldn't have mentioned YouTube, but they called me out on that. So with all of these points...
I love YouTube.
Oh, jeez. So in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 7 through 13, it says, endure suffering as a discipline. God is dealing with you as sons. For what son is there that a father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, which all receive, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Furthermore, we had human fathers discipline us, and we respect them. Shouldn't we submit even more to our Father of the Spirit and live? For they disciplined us for a short time based on what seemed good to them, but he does it for our benefit, so that we can share his holiness. Verse 11, no discipline seems enjoyable at the time, but painful. But later on, however, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. And there's so many scriptures that talk about like parents discipline your children like this. We don't like that word discipline. And a rule of life helps us be disciplined, at least for me, in these very specific areas that John Mark brought up.
Something just popped in my head while you were reading that scripture. We can't do it now, but I'm going to do it, I think, as soon as we're done recording.
Okay.
I want to read that text again, and every time it says discipline, I want to use the word constraint.
Oh.
I think there'll be some new light there. Anyway, 166 into 167, I feel like we need to read a large portion here because it really speaks to this idea of creating guards and a guidance into our lives.
Yeah.
Notice these are more like rules. This is bottom of 166. These are more like rules, but the heart behind them isn't legalism. I am well aware they aren't a measure of my spiritual maturity at all. If anything, my need for them is a measure of my immaturity.
Yeah.
Not one of them makes me any more loving or holy. I just recognize the power of these things like technology and media to both form and deform me. Yeah. Left unchecked, these things are, now pay attention, listeners, viewers, they're designed. They're created to consume my life and shape me into a specific kind of person, one who is wildly unlike Jesus.
Yep.
But my deepest desire is for God to consume my life and in time shape me into his image. And while I'm not saying you need to adopt the same rules I have, I very much believe we all need at least some rules around our phones, and should we choose to play with fire, social media. Does that grate on you? Are you thinking, but I'm a free spirit, I don't like to be controlled? I hate to break it to you, but you are being controlled by your addiction to your phone, the appetites of your body for pleasure, and the spooky algorithms of Silicon Valley. Coming up with rules can put your life back under the control of your deepest desires.
Wow.
Choose your own constraints, or they will be chosen for you. Not by the Spirit of God stirring your own heart toward love, but by a programmer in Silicon Valley working to steal your time and shape your behavior. Now listen, viewers, listen to this.
Yes.
The choice is yours. Rule or be ruled.
Underline, starred, highlight.
I used to weigh potential behaviors with the question, this is at the bottom of 167, is this sinful or not? But now that I better understand the gospel and its possibility of life that is truly life, abundant life with Jesus, my new question is, does this move me toward Jesus or away? That's a totally different way of seeing sin.
Yeah. What goes through my mind here is my deepest desire is I want to exhibit the fruit of the Spirit that Paul writes about in Galatians. I want to walk with the Spirit. If I can't even do that with my wife, Amy, there's something off kilter. If I can't exhibit the fruit of the Spirit with my kids, something is off kilter. Now, I can pretend and fake that with everybody else, but I can't do that with Amy and my kids. And so the rule of life helps me stay in line to be on the trellis, to prune things that need to be pruned, but also have something to be anchored to in order for the fruit of the Spirit to be exhibited with Amy and my kids, especially when they're having a bad day.
Yeah. The rule of life grows the fruit that you really want to grow.
And that is the deepest desire of my heart. But it's also the deepest wrestling match, that whole Romans 7 thing. I don't do what I want to do, and I do what I don't want to do.
But I think, and Ryan's touched on this in the Formation series, part of the depravity doctrine in the church, there is a reality of truth to that. There is a total depravity. There's a reality to that. But I think that a better way to focus as a follower of Jesus is to say, yes, there is this sinful nature that's driving me. Sure. But truly, who I am constitutionally, the devil wants to tell you all you are is a liar. All you are is this. All you are is someone who's rude to your wife and kids. All you are. But that's not true. I am a follower and a son of God.
Yeah.
I have the Spirit of God inside of me, and the Spirit resonates with my spirit, and it says, I want to be like Jesus. I want his kingdom to be here on earth. And when we focus on that lane of thinking, then the rules just, they fall off. I don't feel shackled at all.
Right.
I feel like, oh, this is me living the life that I really want to live.
Yeah.
It's freedom.
It totally is.
It's freedom.
He talks about later, I think, in the chapter, but Tyler Stanton gave the word picture of a boat anchor. And the rule of life, like when you're in a boat, you don't feel the anchor until you've drifted away from the anchor. That's the rule of life, is you don't even feel this tug until you've drifted far away. I love that word picture. Is like, it's not a restraint. It's not constraining me. I have freedom to float and to move. It's not this legalistic thing. But man, when things are off kilter in my life, I'm feeling the tug of that anchor pulling on the boat. It's like, whoa, check engine light. Another word picture, like, okay, something's off kilter here. I need to get refocused and centered. And am I self-deceived? Am I being honest with myself? Do I have others speaking life into me? Do they observe things in my life? And now I can get back to where I'm not tugging on that anchor, but now I'm back to where I'm just kind of floating with wherever the Spirit is.
I just love this picture of the anchor. You know, we live on a lake.
Yeah.
And there's all different shorelines on our lake.
Yeah,
but there's this one shoreline that's kind of, it's over in the southwest corner of our lake that's like really clear and sandy.
Yeah.
That's where I use my anchor.
Yeah.
I drive my boat over there and I drop my anchor. Why? Because I want to stay right there. I want to swim there. I want to enjoy the water and the sand. My anchor is this way that keeps me in the place where I really want to be.
That's really good.
My kids want to get their floaties out, and the people who come to our house. The boat anchor keeps me at the spot on the lake where I want to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll be on the other end where it's kind of mucky.
Yeah.
It's a nice part of the lake, but that's not where I really want to be.
I love that.
168. Let's finish up. What's poking out there on 168 for you? That first sentence at the top of 168. The goal is to live with a kind of focus and intentionality and peacefulness that many admire and aspire to, but precious few attain. We like to say as pastors, and it's a hard call, but it's not unique to us as pastors. Follow me as I follow Christ. There's a whole other weight to a rule of life and living a life that's followable. Because there's different people, you know, their nursery whip is only at that first metal.
Yeah.
They're just getting started.
Yeah.
You know, I want to live a life that people will see and say, man, whatever JB and Jesus have going, I want to know Jesus.
I want that.
I want to be with that Jesus, not JB, the Jesus that he follows. Man, and they start asking this question, what are you doing? Oh, this is what I do. It works for me.
Yeah.
Hope it does for you.
Right. Yeah. Well, so once again, that word intentionality gets used, but I love that idea of peacefulness. And I don't think John Mark is saying that you're not going to go through trials and tribulations and the storms of life. However, in those moments, you can still have peace.
Yeah.
And I think maybe like, hey, that Jesus that I see you in, JB, like, I know that you went through this thing. Like how describe to me that peace that you had when you went through whatever. Like, I want some of that. And I think people will observe that, especially when we're open and vulnerable and transparent and authentic with other people. They're going to see it when life isn't the best, but they're also going to see like that peace that's coming along with that. Like, I want some of that in my life.
It goes back to the mechanic thing. Like, I'm not going to try to fix my car. I'm going to take my car to fish, and he's going to work on it. Those last two sentences, I see you got it.
Yeah.
You go ahead and read those last two there.
So you have to say no more often than yes. because there are only so many hours in a day and so many days in a life. But hear me, a wisely chosen rule has the potential to enrich your life in ways you can't possibly imagine.
Brandon and I were talking about an event that we both were invited to. Brandon's going to go to this event because it was a good, and I explained to him, I was invited, but I can't go to that event. That's not my best yes.
Yeah.
Because of that quantitative, how many hours there are in a day. I'd love to be at everything.
Sure.
I want to do everything. I want to experience everything, eat everything, go every place, own everything.
Yeah.
I love what was the great prophet, Larry the Cucumber, when he was asked by Bob the Tomato asked him, about some toys. Have you seen this episode?
I haven't, no.
So Bob the Tomato says to Larry the Cucumber, how many more toys do you need, Larry? And Larry says, how many are there? It never ends.
Wow.
The pursuit never ends.
Yeah.
There you heard it, Veggie Tales.
It's so hard to say no, and especially if your wiring is to be a people pleaser. That's a very hard practice to be able to say no. I'm getting a little bit better at it, but I know I still have a long ways to go on it.
Me too. Well, friends, again, this has been episode 21 of Radiant Reflections, season 4, going through practicing the way, be with Jesus, become like him, do as he did. I just feel like, Brandon, your presence in the podcast, I filled my cup today. Just thanks for taking your time. I know it's valuable. I felt really stirred up by the Spirit, and I'm excited, and excited about a rule of life. Viewers, listeners, don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Let's leverage the dark algorithm. Let's leverage social media to share something good. And we really do believe a rule of life is God's best for you. Otherwise, we wouldn't have spent this whole season talking about it. John Mark wouldn't have wrote this book. So until next time, may God bless you.